Let's see how you can solve this challenge. In this challenge, you had to print all the elements of a list with the corresponding indices. Of course, we're going to use a for loop. Let's start with our first option, which is the most intuitive one and a very good alternative as well. We start by defining a list, which is my list, okay? And we have a conditional that is going to check if the length of the list is equal to 0 or not. If it's equal to 0, then we print the message empty list. That is what the problem is asking us to do. But right here in the else clause, we have exactly what we need to print the elements and their corresponding indices. We have this for loop, which says for I in range from 0 up to the length of the list minus 1. Remember that this value is not included in the sequence, so we have from 0 up to the last index in the list. We will do this. We will print the element at the specific index I, and we will also print the index. And that is how we can get a sequence. We will get the element followed by a space followed by the index. And these will all be printed in a sequence, one after the other. Let's see how this works when we run our code. Right here you can see. These are the elements 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the corresponding indices are 0, 1, 2, and 3. We will see them separated by a space. Let's also try a different type of element to see this more clearly. A, B, C, and D. We have strings and we will see the corresponding indices in the output. We see A, B, C, and D, followed by their indices 0, 1, 2, and 3. Great, so let's see our second option, which has small improvements. Let me comment this out and let's see this. Plus a great Pythonic tool that you definitely should use if you're working with this language, which is enumerate. Let's see how it works in detail. We start by defining the list, and right here we have a small improvement in our code, which is using the list as a truthy or falsy value. Right here, we are checking if the list is empty or not. If the list is empty, this entire condition will be true. So this will be printed. If the list is not empty, then this will be false, and this message will not be printed. We will go immediately to the else clause, and that is where the for loop is going to start its execution. But notice that right here we don't have the range function. Instead, we have a different function called enumerate. Enumerate is going to return a sequence of the elements and their corresponding indices. When we have enumerate my list, we will get a sequence. I mentioned this in a previous video, so you can just move forward if you already watched that explanation. The index, for example, 0, 1, 2, and 3. If we have 4 elements in this case, we will have indices from 0 to 3. In a type of sequence that is actually not a list, but we can represent it visually as a list because the tuples will be returned one at a time. And these tuples are going to contain the indices as the first element and then the value at that index in the sequence as the second element. Like this. The number 1 is located at index 0. So we have 0, 1. At index 1, we have the number 2. So this is the second element. At index 2, we have the number 3. And that is the second element of our third tuple. And at index 3, we have the element 4, which is the fourth element at our tuple. The tuples are going to be returned once per iteration. In the first iteration, we will have this tuple right here, then we will have the second tuple, the third tuple, and the fourth tuple. So we can assign these values to individual loop variables, like we have right here. I for the index and elem for the element, and work with them in parallel for the corresponding iteration. In this case, we're just going to print the element followed by the index. And that is how we work with enumerate. We get the elements and their corresponding indices. We can also pass a customized parameter to start the sequence at a different number instead of 0, but we typically use it to get all the indices of the elements, so it's a typical application of enumerate to start with 0. We see as the output the elements 1, 2, 3, and 4 with the corresponding indices 0, 1, 2, and 3. And if we have an empty list, let's check this as well. We see empty list. Great work! So now you know how to solve this coding challenge.